Many of them have said that the most vexing wound that they had, that a lot of people don't even think about, don't even see because it doesn't bleed like the other wounds, is the shoulder wound that Christ had from carrying the cross. Christ told them that that was the most vexing wound that caused him the most pain.
Hey, my friends, there's something really neat. You know, the stigmatists, you've heard this before, they have the wounds of Christ in their hands and feet and side and so on. Well, there's only been not too many of those since Jesus Christ himself. And you've heard of Padre Pio, I'm sure, but there's a really neat thing about them. A lot of them have done a lot of the same things and predicted a lot of the same things. A lot of these ones, especially the ones approved, have all sorts of prophecies. Wonder if heaven would be telling us a message through that very thing. Prophecies about the future, prophecies that look like they're right now. To speak with us about this is the author of, well, many books, 20 books, in fact. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He is a professor at the Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania, and he's the new author of a book out by 10 called The Stigmatists. You're going to want to stay tuned to this episode of the John-Henry Westen Show.
Praised be Jesus. If you saved in gold money over 50 years or 5 years, your wealth is intact. But if you saved in the dollar, you've already lost 95%. That was the insight America's founders understood when they mandated gold and silver as America's money. Different stocks produce different returns, and the type of gold and silver you save in produces drastically different outcomes. So call us and let us share those nuances and show you why a trust audit concluded St. Joseph is a standout for integrity and value in the metals space.
Paul Kengor, so good to be with you.
The great John-Henry, it is good to be with you. So I'm a longtime reader of LifeSite News, and I watch many of your podcasts, and I check the site frequently, several times a week. So it's good to be on with you. Thanks.
Praise God. Well, let's begin with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. So, Paul, you've got a very fascinating book here. I'm particularly fascinated because of the prophetic element, which actually figures in largely to the book. First of all, if you can, give us the first description. What is a stigmatist anyway?
Yeah. And I knew, by the way, that you would probably be interested in the prophetic element. No question about that. In fact, a lot of the reporting of LifeSite News deals with a lot of this kind of stuff. But yeah, first in terms of what stigmatists are. So these are people who bear in their body the marks of Jesus Christ and the Passion. And typically these will be nail marks in the hands and the palms, also in the feet, often in the side. In some cases, the crown of thorns. And in some cases, too, I mean, not everybody, John-Henry, has all of the wounds, right? And I mean, nobody has like everything that Jesus had, right? I mean, that would be all kinds of marks all over your body. But it would be, some portion of the suffering that identifies with Christ's passion. For example, St. Rita of Cascia was gifted, as she put it, with one single thorn from the crown of thorns. That's all that she had. Others have had, and this is quite interesting, many of them have said, Therese Newman, Anne Catherine Emmerich, a number of others, that the most vexing wound that they had, that a lot of people don't even think about, don't even see because it doesn't bleed like the other wounds, is the shoulder wound that Christ had from carrying the cross. And many of them being mystics who had conversations with Christ or claimed to, right? Christ told them that that was the most vexing wound that caused him the most pain. So even though it didn't protrude blood like the others. And when you think about it, Jesus told us that if you want to follow me, pick up your cross and follow me. I think, from a kind of theological point of view, that one is particularly profound, right? That would be the wound that would vex them the most. The first stigmatist, everyone believes that it was St. Francis. And, you and I are talking in 2024. We just marked the 800th anniversary of Francis receiving the stigmata. That would have been September 17th, 1224. But in Galatians, the Apostle Paul says, I bear in my body the marks of Jesus Christ. That's in Galatians, and the Greek for that is stigmata. Some people think, well, metaphorically, he's talking about being scourged, being flogged, being shipwrecked, that famous passage. But others say, well, it could mean that he's saying that he has markings in his body
Yeah.
like Jesus.
Particularly when he says this, he asks our Lord to remove the thorn in his side. And maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. And Anne Catherine Emmerich and Therese Newman, who neither one are saints. In the book, I tried to focus on saints, although I do a chapter on Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. So they're both in the process of potential hopeful canonization. But they were two of the most remarkable mystics in the history of the church. They had not only prophecies, but they claimed incredible visions of things in the past, in the life of Jesus, the life of the Blessed Mother. Anne Catherine Emmerich's visions were inspired Mel Gibson's The Passion, a number of the scenes in The Passion. They both claimed to be able to see St. Paul, and they both told their spiritual directors, oh, yeah, Paul was the first.
Oh, wow.
Paul was the first stigmatist. I've seen the wounds. And then after that, it was Francis, and I've seen Francis's wounds. So you have this long period from first century with Paul to Francis in the year 1224 of not any stigmatists that we know of. And somebody say, well, maybe there were some we don't know. I bet there weren't, because when these people had these wounds, I mean, everyone knew. I mean, people came from miles around. Word got around quick. The little nun in Calabria who, like clockwork, on a Thursday or Friday starts bleeding from her hands. And she's having her agony in the garden. It's like she's on the cross by 3 o'clock on Friday. And then by Saturday morning, everybody watches the doctors, the psychiatrists, the spiritual director, the priest, the bishop, and the cardinal. And there's no markings on Saturday morning at all, right? Yeah. So word gets around. Everyone comes to see that. So the most famous, Paul, Francis, and then Padre Pio, who's a contemporary of ours. Really, I was born in 1966. He died in 1968. But most of them have been women. 90% have been women. That's a little bit of an overview to get us started with your first question on.
It's also been studied. That's I think really key. People have to understand the scientists go there and they filmed it. So we've got stuff on film now. So there's no way people are faking this stuff. Even some kind of Freudian psychosomatic thing. It's not going to work this way.
One of the doubters of Padre Pio, who was a very arrogant clergy official from the Vatican, said he said Pio needed to be studied by more trained psychiatrists like him. And he said, I know what's going on here. Pio and Father Benedetto they've entered into an incubus succubus relationship here, right? And if we could just put plaster, like a cast, over the feet and leg of Pio, we could figure this out. And then another said, I know what's causing this in Pio. It's obviously real. I mean, you couldn't make these marks and have them bleed a cup a day like this for 50 years. This is being created by what I would diagnose as a form of autosuggestion, right? And Pio's like, autosuggestion, autosuggestion. Well, tell him to imagine that he's a bull, and let's see if he grows horns from his head. Autosuggestion, right? I mean, so that's the kind of thing that takes a greater leap of faith. And as you saw in the book, I spend a lot of time quoting medical testimony in many of these cases, which I think is among the most riveting passages in the book, is you'll get these agnostic, atheistic German doctors, right? Very careful, very rigid. I do not believe in the supernatural. I do not believe in God, but this is extraordinary. The woman eats nothing but the Eucharist, for what they call the Eucharist, for 40 years. She drinks only water. We give her other food. She vomits it up. This would be Therese Newman. She's bleeding from her hands. Pio, he bleeds a cup a day. He doesn't get infections. I don't know how it happens. This is clearly the supernatural. That's the most remarkable thing about it, that even the skeptics become convinced that it's something that they can't plainly explain by modern medical science.
Yeah, that other aspect of some of them not eating at all, except for the Holy Eucharist, for years and years and years. Therese Newman was, 40 years?
Yeah, 40 years in her case. And she gained weight. In fact, she went from about 120 pounds when she was younger to about 200 some pounds. And she was there in bed. They were usually bedridden. Anne Catherine Emmerich ate nothing but the Eucharist the last 10 years of her life. They couldn't get out of bed. By the way, it gets to also, too, Anne Catherine Emmerich's incredible visions of the things that she could see in the Holy Land. I've read her volumes. I'm always blown away by it. And for people who think, well, yeah, she went there and then came back. And no, she never left her bed, man. She never left. The visions are so detailed that it's just hard to imagine anybody coming up or making up that sort of level of detail.
Yeah. In fact, one of the world's greatest poets, arguably the greatest world poet, Brentano, he gave up his whole life sitting there recording her visions forever and ever. It's like 3,000 pages. It's incredible. But tell us about Blessed Lucy of Narnia and her connection with Lucy from Narnia.
A lot of people don't know that that's where C.S. Lewis got his idea for Lucy of Narnia. I mean, Lucy is one of the two main female protagonists in the Narnia series. And I remember the first time that I was in Italy and I was driving from Rome area, Trevignano Romano up to Assisi, and we had my friend Fabrizio, who was our guide. And we were going through this one town, and it was called Narnia. And he said, Paul, this is the, what's his name? Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis. And I said, yeah. You know how Italians are. They think everything is created by them, right? My mom's Italian. So you can listen to that side of the family. They think Italians invented everything, right? And he's like, yeah, he got his idea for Narnia from here. I'm like, yeah, right, Fabrizio. But so later I learned, yeah, he got the idea, Blessed Lucy of Narnia, who was this incredible saint 600 years ago. Body was incorrupt for a long time. She was a stigmatist, and she's kind of symptomatic because most of the stigmatists, over 90%, have been women. And from a particular country of origin, over 70% have been Italian. There's probably more Italian saints than any other particular country. But after Italy, the stigmatists, it would be France, Germany. In modern times, more recently in the last 100 years or so, they're coming from more parts of the world. They're more geographically diverse. Hilaire Belloc said the faith is Europe and Europe is the faith. Well, the faith is declining in Europe. It's growing, Asia, Africa, elsewhere. So you're getting more stigmatists from those areas.
Now, you have a fascinating contrast in your book between Saint Francis and Martin Luther. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as Francis being the true reformer. He's the one that reformed the church, and he goes there to this broken down chapel at San Damiano. That's where the famous San Damiano cross is, and Jesus speaks to him from the cross, the image of Jesus on the cross, and he says, "Francesco, repara la mia chiesa," right? Repair my house, repair my church, repara la mia casa. Some say casa, some say chiesa. Casa is house, chiesa is church, and for it has fallen, it needs repaired. And Francis, at that point, looking around at the immediate surroundings, saying, oh, Jesus is telling me to rebuild this church. So he starts rebuilding this church, the San Damiano Chapel. And then it later becomes clear in his ultimate call that he's to help rebuild the church, capital C, uppercase C, Chiesa, the Roman Catholic Church. Goes to Rome, talks to the Pope, tries to get his order recognized. And all of a sudden, you get this huge following of people who become the Franciscans, right? The Brothers Minor. And you get this revolution in the church that goes from about the period. So Francis is born in around 1180, 1181, lived for 40, 43, 44 years, and died, I think in the year 1228, I believe. It's off the top of my head. And there's a period from about Francis, St. Dominic is that time as well, the Dominicans, until about the end of the life of Catherine of Siena. And she's the stigmatist on the cover of the book. She died in the year 1380. That period from about 1170 to 1380, about 200 years, that was a golden age in the church. I mean, Aquinas is during that period, Bonaventure, even Dante, right? Dante writes his Divine Comedy during that period. But what Francis does is he reforms the church. What Luther does not become a reformer. He becomes a rebeller, right? He rebels. I would call what he did not the Reformation, but rebellion. So if you want an example of true reform, repairing the church, that's what Francis did. It's not what Luther did.
Indeed. Now, I want to get to this But there's a couple more questions because there's lots I want to talk to you about the whole prophecy bit. But before we get there, there's one other very interesting thing here, and it is about St. Catherine of Siena. Now, you talk about how she writes about something I never realized. She writes about homosexuality and homosexuality in the clergy. So I think our readers would really love to know about that. You even make reference in your book to James Martin.
Yeah, it's stunning. So in her dialogue, all right, that's her main book, her written down conversations with God the Father. All right. I mean, in many cases. And in fact, you can find a lot of the copies of the dialogue today. And the section on homosexuality and impurity among the clergy is often excerpted out in modern versions.
Oh, really?
And it is. And you can find a lot of examples of this. You almost have to go online to find older editions of it. And when you read it, you'll see why. It is very politically incorrect what she says. And she says that God told her, he said, I wiped out 5 entire cities because of the scourge of homosexuality. So God tells her that. And he said, it is such a vile activity that even the demons flee away in disgust. The demons are happy to lead clergy or priests or whoever into that type of immoral behavior. But then when the physical act is taking place, the demons, being fallen angels, and so originally angelic in nature, right, as Satan certainly was, are so repulsed by it that they flee in disgust. So it is at that point in time, God is condemning to her homosexuality among priests and in general among the culture. And it has to make you think, John-Henry, right, that if God was that shocked that he was willing to wipe out 5 entire cities because of the sin of homosexuality, what must he be thinking today when it's so widespread in the West, around the world, and accepted and even celebrated? And for people that are watching this show right now and don't like what we're saying, hey, take it up with Catherine of Siena, man. All right. You take it up with her, take it up with God. You know, that's what she's claiming. And remember, she's a doctor of the church. She's one of the few female doctors of the church. She was a stigmatist. You probably like her because she was a strong woman. She spoke truth to power. She told the Pope to toughen up, get out of Avignon, quit being a wimp, go back to Rome. Oh, but I could be killed there. I could be in there. You get back there. This little Italian woman, right? Tough as nails, gets actually hidden stigmata because she begged God not to make them public in Pisa, Italy, and did incredible things before dying at the age of 33. Somebody else who lived off of nothing but the Eucharist in her final days. But she said that that's what God told her about homosexuality. So take it or leave it.
Unbelievable too. Her story is so incredible because she was a lay woman too, and so just unbelievable. Anyway, lots there, but so now let's get to Saint Anne or Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. You have in your book, she writes that Satan will be unchained for 50 to 60 years before the year 2000.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you understand that revelation based on the history of the world around that time? I mean, first of all, what time are we dealing with? This is Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, and she's saying before the year 2000, there's going to come 50 or 60 years, Satan will be unchained 50 or 60 years before that.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. And for my Protestant brothers and sisters who are watching us right now, I'm a former Protestant. Let me start this by quoting the book of Revelation. Okay, and this is Revelation 20:1-3. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain. And he seized the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan. And he bound him for 1,000 years and threw him into the pit and shut it and sealed it over him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be loosed for a little while. So that's in the Bible, folks. Now, Anne Catherine Emmerich's innovation here, right, is that she was told, and she lived from 1774 to 1824. So she actually died at the age of 49, so almost 50 years altogether. This is a woman who's in a bed in Germany, and she can't even get out of bed. She's bleeding so much all the time in constant agony. And she's told in one of her visions that Satan will be unleashed from the floor of hell for a period, quote, 50 to 60 years before the year 2000. All right. Now, she couldn't have known this in 1820. All right. But the math on that, that would be 1940 to 1950. Wow. Okay. That is the outbreak of World War II, deadliest war in the history of humanity. Only previous war that came close was World War One, and there were 5, 6, 7 times the number killed in World War II than World War One. Holocaust, Pearl Harbor, all the deaths in America, Eastern Europe, around the world. The war ends. Stalin, Iron Curtain descends across Europe. Eastern Europe is taken over by the communists to begin this long period of communist occupation there. Cold War starts. 1946 to 49. That's the Chinese Revolution, October 1949. Somehow, no one can still make sense of it. I see this as a professor of international relations. We still can't figure out how in the world Mao Zedong defeated Chiang Kai-shek and the communists overtook the Chinese nationalists. They take over, win 1949, and then more people died under communist China, 60 to 70 million, than even died under Stalin's Soviet Union during that period. So that's 1940 to 1950. That's the 50 to 60 years before the year 2000. That was her prediction. And she even said in her prediction that she was told that for a time before that, some demons would be unleashed even earlier, including in the time that she was currently living in. She has that prophecy in 1820. She's in Germany. Karl Marx is born May 5th, 1818, right there in Germany. Friedrich Engels is born in 1820. These were the guys that gave you the Communist Manifesto. They gave you communism. So how she could come up with, that kind of, I mean, you talk about nailing a prophecy
Indeed.
with the timeline, that's almost uncanny to think of.
For U.S. residents, creating a will has never been easier. Thanks to My Legacy Will, an online platform free of charge, you can now create your own will and choose to include LifeSite News in it, specify where your funeral will take place, the number of masses to be offered for your soul, and how your estate will be distributed. We would be deeply grateful if you remembered LifeSite News in your will. Visit mylegacywill.com/LifeSite News. Thank you for your support, and may God bless you. What do you think this has to do with Leo XIII's prophecy? Remember his prophecy for which he created the St. Michael prayer. He saw 100 years where Satan would be given loosed, if you will. Do you think that has any correlation?
I do. And in fact, and I also quote Hildegard of Bingen, who is an extraordinary saint as well. I think she's also a doctor of the church, female doctor of the church. And she also had these visions about 1,000 years and around this period. But specifically, Leo XIII, his pontificate was 1878 to 1903. And so he has that vision right at the turn of the century. And with the 100 years to come in the 20th century was the deadliest century in the history of humanity. World War I, World War II, Cold War, China, abortion. Abortion was first legalized among any state. Communist Russia, 1920, and by the 1970s. Remember, my field of study is actually Russia, Cold War, communism. So, it's according to official Soviet statistics, and I know you're real big and your website on life issues, of course. According to the Soviet Health Ministry, in the 1970s, in the Soviet Union, they were averaging 7 to 8 million abortions per year. 7 to 8 million abortions per year. Now, here in America, I mean, we were at about 1 million a year. All right. They were at 7 to 8 million a year, and they had even less of a population than we did. And then the other deadly countries were abortion, all the communist countries, Cuba, China, one-child policy, Romania, you name it. So all of that hell is unleashed, unchained, if you will, in that period prophesied by Leo XIII, and even earlier than him, by Anne Catherine Emmerich in Germany.
What did you make of Anne Catherine Emmerich's visions of the two popes and the relationship between the two popes and so on?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I spent a lot of time on that. And some people think that it applied possibly in our day to Pope Francis. I mean, I don't, it seems to probably apply to a pope in her time. She also spoke about a counterfeit church. And I might even quote somebody from LifeSite News on that in the footnotes. I think I do. Someone who did a really good job with it. So I don't know that it applies to our time. But it's certainly compelling. I mean, one that I think, not to change gears on you, that does apply to this in a really remarkable way. And so related that it's our current day. Sister Agnes of Sasagawa, the Our Lady of Akita seer, who is so recent that she just died. She died in 2024. She died this past summer. She was the one who she had visions in July and August and October 1973. And her vision, October 13th, 1973, that's the anniversary of the miracle of the sun at Fatima. And her bishop, Bishop Ito, who later said that the faithful can indeed follow her prophecy, her vision as being of supernatural origin. He said the message of Akita is the message of Fatima. So she was a stigmatist. A lot of people don't realize that she had stigmata while she was having these visions. And LifeSite News has covered this. And since her death, it's a really weird thing. They donated her body to science in Japan. You guys have covered this, John-Henry. It's the first place where I read it. Other websites have done nothing on it. And I thought, why are they donating her body to science? She should be under glass somewhere to be checked for incorruptibility. I don't know what all's taken place there. However, if you read Bishop Ito's investigation and formal statement and everything, what a lot of people don't realize is she had stigmata. And her prophecy of October 13th, 1973, I think this gets to our time right now with Pope Francis. She said, there will come a time when bishop will be against bishop, cardinal against cardinal, clergy against clergy. It would be this difficult time in the church. And that vision was right about the time of Pope Paul VI, now a saint, talking about the smoke of Satan having entered the church. And she predicts that October 13, 1971 vision, that there will come a time of great chastisement, fire from the sky that will be worse than the great deluge, as she puts it. That was 1973. And that seer, Our Lady of Akita, that stigmatist, Sister Agnes of Sasagawa, just died. Yeah. So this isn't somebody in 1224 like Francis. This is 2024.
Indeed. In fact, I believe it was in 2019, she put out a statement, which no one had ever heard of her for such a long time, just about the times being severe and we need to pray and so on. Just incredible things that we're actually living through. One of the ones I also wanted to bring out for everybody, because I think is largely unknown, that is this Blessed Elena Aiello and these visions and letters to Mussolini. What's that all about?
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, that one really struck me. So she was born 1895, died 1961. She's another modern. I mean, in the 1960s, you had three really significant stigmatists who passed. You had her, Therese Neumann in Germany, Padre Pio in 1968. But she was this little Italian nun from Calabria, Italy. And she really struck me because my family on my mom's side, they're from Calabria, Italy. And I had also read on some different websites about the incredible prophecies that she had. Then in the course of reading her prophecies, I learned that, wow, she was a stigmatist as well. She had stigmata for a long time. She had visions in her time. Now, there's some that are still yet to come, supposedly. But in her time, she was this seer about events in Italy in World War II related to Mussolini. And she had Mussolini's attention in the way that Catherine of Siena had the powers of Italy's attention. Mussolini even wrote a check to her school for girls because he was so impressed. Mussolini's sister, who was very devout, also followed everything that Elena Aiello said. Now, again, keep in mind, this lady, Good Friday, she's bleeding, all the people come around, everybody's gathered around. So word gets around. Everyone knows this is going on. This isn't 1350. This is 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And she told Mussolini, she addressed him, Il Duce, listen to me, right? I am here to tell you, there is still time for you to be a hero, to be the man who saved Italy, who spared Italy from humiliation. And an interesting, John-Henry, she said a number of times in this letter, Rome itself will be preserved because the Vatican is in Rome, almost like God has a dome of protection over there. But the rest of Italy will suffer terribly if you don't stop now, if you don't stop now. And then she sends another letter, again through Mussolini's sisters. This was around 1943. Time is running out for him. And I am here to tell you now, I have been told, right, by God, that if you do not quickly make peace and stop cooperating with Hitler and the Japanese, you will suffer a worse, more ignominious fate than Napoleon. Now, Napoleon, Waterloo was 1815, and then he's allowed to retire in exile to St. Helena, died in 1821. Not Mussolini. Mussolini didn't listen, didn't repent, and he gets strung up in a gas station in Milan by the communists, and next to one of his mistresses. It's cut down, bodies dragged through the streets. They spit on him, they kick him up and down the streets. Should have listened to the little Italian nun from Calabria. She also predicted days of darkness, a final chastisement, a ball of fire from the sky. How many days of darkness? There's not much written on her in the West. I had to get Italian books on her. According to the English translation of one of these books, she predicted, quote, 70 hours of darkness, 70. 70 is 3 days, all right? Yeah. 3 days of darkness. Faustina Kowalska in her diary talks about days of darkness, but she doesn't use the number 3. But Elena Aiello says, basically 3 days of darkness. She pegs it, 70 hours. Days of darkness has also been prophesied by Faustina, who had hidden stigmata, she of the diary. Maria Julie Gehenny, who had stigmata. She was 91 years old when she died. She had the stigmata for like 70 some years. Blessed Anna Maria Taigi, who if you Google 3 days of darkness and Wikipedia pops up, Wikipedia actually has an entry for 3 days of darkness. They attributed the prophecy to her. She talks about beeswax candles and everything. And so a lot of people in our circles, John-Henry, they know about 3 days of darkness. They know about beeswax candles. They know about Anna Maria Taigi. They don't know that she was a stigmatist. She was. Yeah. So for me, and this is what really struck me about all of this research, it's one thing if my neighbor down the street is claiming that, the end times are coming and he's talking to the Virgin Mary and he's out there mowing his lawn. And I tell my wife, hey, Susan, I think Jim's kind of lost it. He thinks he's talking to the Virgin Mary in the woods. But if there's somebody who's church approved, bleeding like clockwork from their hands and feet on a Thursday, Friday, wounds are gone on Saturday. It goes on for years, decades, eating nothing but the Eucharist. They bring in teams of psychiatrists and doctors and physicians and spiritual directors in the Vatican and everything else. That person I'm taking seriously. I'm taking their predictions seriously. It's like a divine mark, stamp of approval, like an imprimatur in a way. I'm going to take those prophecies a lot more seriously than I would from Jim if he's just down there in his garage talking to his dog about the Blessed Virgin.
Your book also indicates that there are stigmatists right now, not even just 10 years ago and 20 years ago, but right now, not approved or anything, of course, but they're existing, living right now, actually making prophecies as well.
There are, and you would think that there would be, so people shouldn't be dismissive of that. Now, at the same time, you don't want to be skeptical. You don't want to be cynical. You want to keep, have an open mind. Keep in mind, Padre Pio wasn't canonized for 3.5 decades after his death. And it's Padre Pio. I mean, you would think Pio would have been canonized within a week of him being entombed, right? But no, it took decades. He was doubted in his time, including by very high-level Vatican officials in many cases. And there have been, in the course of history, there haven't been a lot of studies on this, and I don't know that the Vatican keeps a running list. But from the studies that have been done, there have been probably about 400 to 500 stigmatists. Some people, that might sound like a lot, but in the course of the history of humanity, I mean, how many billions of people have lived? And there have been more in modern day, 1800s, 1900s. And there are a number of claims of people today. I had one person contact me who's a friend of a priest, and this guy was with Tan Books, and he knows of somebody, asked if I wanted to come along and see I didn't go. Maybe I should. Maybe I should check it out. The founder of EWTN, Mother Angelica, Rhoda Wise, who was the woman who brought her to the faith. She was a stigmatist. That's not that long ago. That's 20th century. And there are cases today that are out there. They're mentioned on a number of different websites. They're easy to find. I talk about some of them. I'm very careful with it. And I say, I don't know if these are legit. The church hasn't ruled on it. And I certainly don't know if the prophecies, it's all private revelation. I don't know if the prophecies are legit, but here's what they say. Here's what they're saying. And it is remarkable how a number of them repeat that same phrase, great ball of fire from the sky, great deluge, chastisement worse than the great flood. And let me add this, Faustina Kowalska, who died in 1938 at the age of 33, and we all have her diary. She was the first canonized saint of the new millennium by John Paul II. We do the Divine Mercy Chaplet because of her revelation, right? And she's the one who Jesus said, you will prepare the world for my second coming. And he told her about days of darkness enveloping the whole world, and then a final sign would appear in the sky, right? Like a cross in the sky it would only be the wounds of Christ that would provide the only light, piercing the darkness and illuminating all of humanity. So I really take Faustina seriously. And she was hidden stigmata.
I did a show once on St. Faustina because she described in her diary, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the day Pope Francis was born, she had one of the worst sufferings she ever had because of the suffering that was in the church. But it happened to be in her diary on the day of Bergoglio's birth. Well, as is your book, Paul, I have to commend you. It's a very fascinating study. And what I love is that when men of great intellect spend all the time that it takes to delve deep into these things, to get the actual facts and then present them so people can be confident in what they're reading. So with
You're
that,
not talking about me, men of great intellect.
I am indeed. And I would encourage people to go and get the book called The Stigmatists. It's available by Tan Publishers, great publishers of Catholic books, and they can be found wherever good books are sold, but at Tan Publishing. And of course, for those outside of America, I think Amazon will cover it as well.
I am a scholar and an academic. And so one of the reasons I did this book was I wanted to sort this out in my own mind. What's real and what's not, what's being reported on websites in a sloppy way that's not really documentable. Did this person really have that vision? And so a lot of this I did for my own peace of mind. And then once I put together, I thought, wow, people need to know this. People need to know about these prophecies and as well as the medical reports on the stigmatists and everything. So thank you. That's very kind of you to say that.
Praise God. Well, thank you. Thank you, Paul. So good to be with you on the show. Paul Kengor, ladies and gentlemen, please go get The Stigmatists, available from Tan. Thank you so much, Paul. God bless you.
Thanks, John-Henry. God bless.
And God bless all of you. And we'll see you next time. Hi, everyone. This is John-Henry Westen for LifeSite News. We hope you found this video insightful. For more content like this, be sure to check out the links in the description below. You can also follow us on social media to stay updated on the latest news concerning life, faith, family, and freedom. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.